As many of you know, I grew up in Richmond, Virginia for the most part, and there really weren't apple orchards around. So it wasn't until I met my wife, Tracy, my Connecticut New Englander wife, that I came to appreciate the fall tradition of picking apples at an apple orchard. Raising our girls in Vermont, we always went to the Shelburne apple orchard in October, and since we moved here, we've insisted on driving up north a little bit to keep the tradition alive. Although now it's always accompanied with a little bit of grousing. Wow, they're expensive down here. Or where are the picking poles? Are there more trees somewhere? But still, it's a tradition we love, and frankly, apples are a miracle. These gnarly trees that aren't much to look at have all summer been just methodically converting sunlight, rain, and the material of their own bodies into these bright red, green, and yellow orbs of absolute delightful deliciousness. I mean, it's really incredible. Who can pick an apple from a tree on a crisp autumn day and not at least entertain the idea that there is an extravagant, loving, creative presence behind the created world? It puts me in mind of one of my favorite but somewhat lesser known carols that derived from New England, a Christmas carol called Jesus Christ the Apple Tree. And it goes like this. So the tree of life my soul has seen, laden with fruit and always green. The tree of life my soul has seen, laden with fruit and always green. The trees of nature fruitless be, compared with Christ, the apple tree. It's a carol that uses the image of those miraculous fruit as a symbol for Jesus Christ. It's an interesting symbol given that it was the apple, at least how it's usually rendered, that Adam and Eve desired and was the instrument of their fall from grace. Whatever you do, don't eat from the fruit of that tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The desire for that leads to splicing and dicing and judging that should be left to God. The carol, though, rehabilitates the apple and speaks of Jesus Christ as the apple tree, the right object of our ultimate desire, the tree of life my soul has seen, laden with fruit and always green. While the carol doesn't contain the usual Christmas images of birth and manger, star and shepherd and angels, it does speak beautifully of the heart of Advent, the 4 weeks that we enter into this Sunday leading up to Christmas, which is ultimately the season of desire. It's why we read scriptures about a time where things will be finally put to right, where justice and peace will reign, where truth and wisdom will finally be heard, where love will be all in all. Scriptures about waiting and preparing for Jesus to come again to usher in the final fulfillment. It's why we open our calendars day by day and light candles in preparation. It's all for the purpose of stoking our desire for God and God's coming reign of love. So for Advent to come, right as we are feeling the world and our country are teetering towards an abyss of sorts, is perfect. And it's supposed to inflame our hearts, Advent is, towards hope and expectation for something that will set it right. As it was in the days of Noah, so will it be in the coming of the Son of Man. Therefore, keep watch so you are ready. But the church, of course, is not the only institution in the business of stoking our desires at this time of year. The Christian church might have initiated the season of desire called Advent in order to set people's hearts and minds towards God and God's purposes, but there is a more aggressive and in many ways more effective machine that works overtime at full tilt to stoke our desire for things that can be packaged and sold, the machine of the marketplace, which is in many ways a God we are more devoted to than God, God's self. And it runs at such a fevered pitch that the church hardly has a chance. But all things are possible for God. And so our Advent question then is, where will our desire be focused and how will it be stoked? The church tries to encourage our desire towards the deeper and more enduring hope, while our culture continually pulls us back to the surface and says, hope, schmope, buy this, you'll feel better, look better, be better right now. But St. Augustine in his Confessions says it plainly, you have made us for yourself, O God, and our hearts are restless till they find their rest in you. We were made as human beings to desire. That is a good thing. And so much of what we desire is so good. But the wisdom, the love, the peace that are of God's essence is what lies at the heart of our desire. And yet, as we all know, as Gerald May says in his book, Addiction and Grace, our desire can become attached to things that are much less than those essential qualities of God. So, for instance, the heart of human desire is to know that we are loved in some ultimate sense by God, but we seek out the affirmation of others, which tends to be based on what we do, not who we are. Or we sense an emptiness within ourselves and try to fill it with a myriad of activities and products when more authentic relationship is what we need. Last week I took an 8-day silent retreat at a Jesuit retreat house on the North Shore. And you want to taste emptiness. You want to realize how often we rush towards distraction. If you're anything like me, then take an 8-day silent retreat. It highlights such things, but it also is punctuated. You give yourself to that, and it is punctuated with these near breathtaking moments in the emptiness where you suddenly catch something of God's beauty and love. It is God's beauty and love that our souls desire, and when we experience it, even for a moment, everything else pales in comparison. Or maybe I should say, everything you realize, everything is actually shot through with God, with God's love and God's presence. His beauty doth all things excel, by faith I know, but ne'er can tell. His beauty doth all things excel. By faith I know, but ne'er can tell. The glory which I now can see in Jesus Christ, the apple tree. For happiness I long have sought, and pleasure dearly I have bought. For happiness I long have sought, and pleasure dearly I have bought. I miss them all, but now I see 'tis found in Christ, the apple tree. In the season of Advent, we are reminded that the true object of our desire is no object at all, but rather a presence, a relationship with God. And this doesn't necessarily mean we need to be detached from the things of this world. In fact, the incarnation, the Word of God made flesh that we celebrate at this time of year and throughout all the year is a miraculous and exuberant embrace and affirmation of the material world, not as the stuff we need to shed to become more spiritual, but the very stuff by which and through which we can come to know God more fully. As Christians, by saying that Jesus is God infleshed, incarnated, we are saying that the things of this material world are the things of God. We take a loaf of bread and a drink of wine or juice, and as this is going to be, and we sit there on the seaside and we watch the gulls diving into the surf, or we take a bite of an apple, and we say these elements are the very pathways to God. But that's part of the key, is that they're the pathways. The problem with attachment and addiction is when the pathway becomes the end in and of itself. Right? That's the monotheistic kind of tightrope, is understanding the material world is not the equivalent of God, nor is it opposed to or against God. Rather, it's the passage to God. And it's not about becoming detached from this world in order to find God, but through the things of this world to become attached to God. Through the gifts of this world to express our love to one another. That's the movement of Christmas. It's not about the gifts, right? It's about the love that is expressed by way of the gift. Our consumer culture does get us all turned around on this account. William Cavanaugh has this book called Being Consumed, Economics and Christian Desire, and he says, most people in our culture are not overly attached to things, and most are not obsessed with hoarding riches. Indeed, the United States has one of the lowest saving rates of any wealthy country, and we are the most indebted society in history. What really characterizes consumer culture, he says, is not attachment to things, but detachment from things. People do not hoard money, they spend it. People do not cling to things, they discard them and buy other things. Our relationship with products tends to be short-lived. Rather than hoarding treasured objects, consumers are characterized by a constant dissatisfaction with material goods. The dissatisfaction is what produces the restless pursuit of satisfaction in the form of something new. Consumerism is not so much about having more as it is about having something else. That's why it's not simply buying but shopping that's at the heart of consumerism. So Cavanaugh claims that it is not the stuff per se that we are addicted to, but the process of acquiring, and the machine must always keep that process going if it hopes to stay afloat, destroy the earth or not. The economy, Cavanaugh says, as it is currently structured, would grind to a halt if we ever looked at our stuff and declared, it is enough. I am happy with what I have. Or I might add, from here in church, the economy would grind to a halt if we were to ever finally say, wait a minute, it is not more stuff that I desire, it is God that I desire. All this time I've been running after what I thought would satisfy me. Where can I find my rest from this treadmill, from this restlessness? I'm weary with my former toil. Here I will sit and rest a while. I'm weary with my former toil. Here I will sit and rest a while. Under the shadow I will be of Jesus Christ, the apple tree. Our rest is found in the shadow of Jesus. In the season of Advent, the church calls us to stay awake, to watch and wait, to eagerly expect the coming of Christ, to set our desire upon the coming of God, upon God's justice, wisdom, peace. For that's what our souls have been aching and longing for. And if we taste the fruit of that tree, we will understand finally that it can satisfy beyond all measure. The fruit doth make my soul to thrive. It keeps my dying faith alive. This fruit doth make my soul to thrive. It keeps my dying faith alive, which makes my soul in haste to be with Jesus Christ, the apple tree.